The doctor's office smelled like antiseptic and cheap air freshener, and the fluorescent lights above me buzzed with that low, persistent hum that makes you feel like you are already dead inside. I sat on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath me every time I shifted my weight, and I stared at the results on the screen that the nurse had just pulled up. Gonorrhea. Positive. And in that single moment, 19 years of marriage, 19 years of trust, 19 years of building a life with the man I thought I knew better than anyone on this planet. All of it crumbled like a sandcastle hit by a wave I never saw coming. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what I lost before you can understand how it felt to lose it. My name is Claire, and I met my husband David when we were both 25 years old, back in 2001. We were at a mutual friend's barbecue in the suburbs. One of those lazy Sunday afternoon gatherings where the burgers are slightly burnt and someone always brings a potato salad that nobody touches. David was standing by the grill, wearing a faded blue polo shirt and these ridiculous cargo shorts that he somehow made look charming. He had this laugh, this full-bodied, head-thrown-back laugh that made everyone around him want to be in on whatever joke he was telling. I remember walking over to grab a drink from the cooler, and he looked at me with those warm brown eyes and said something completely stupid about the weather, and I was hooked. Just like that. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. He did it at the same park where we had our first real date, a picnic by the lake where he had packed sandwiches that were honestly terrible, but I ate every bite because I was already falling in love with him. He got down on one knee and pulled out this ring that had been his grandmother's, a modest diamond in a vintage setting, and he said the words that I would replay in my head for the next 2 decades. Claire, you are the only person I want to wake up next to for the rest of my life. Will you marry me? And I said yes. I said yes without a single doubt, without a single hesitation, because I believed him. I believed every single word. Our wedding was small, but beautiful. We held it in a little church in the countryside, just family and close friends, about 60 people total. I wore my mother's dress, altered to fit me, and David cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. His best man, Greg, had to hand him a handkerchief. My maid of honor, my sister Rachel, squeezed my hand as I reached the altar and whispered, "He is the one, Claire. I can see it." And I believed her too, because everything in my life pointed to this being exactly right. The first few years of our marriage were the kind of years that people write love songs about. We bought our first house, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood with good schools, even though we did not have children yet. David was working as an accountant at a mid-sized firm, putting in long hours, but always coming home with stories about his eccentric coworkers. I was teaching at the local primary school, and I loved my job. We would come home in the evenings and cook dinner together, David chopping vegetables, while I stirred whatever sauce we were attempting that week. We were not perfect. We argued about money sometimes, about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom, about whether we should get a dog or a cat. But even our arguments felt safe, like we were just 2 people figuring out how to share a life. And there was never a moment when I questioned whether we would make it. Our son, Thomas, was born 3 years into the marriage. I remember the day so vividly it hurts. David held my hand through 16 hours of labor, and when Thomas finally arrived, screaming and red-faced and perfect, David looked at me with tears streaming down his face and said, "We made a person, Claire. We actually made a person." He was the most hands-on father I had ever seen. He did the night feedings without complaining. He changed diapers with a dedication that bordered on obsessive, and he read to Thomas every single night, even when Thomas was too young to understand a word of it. I would stand in the doorway of the nursery and watch David reading some picture book about a caterpillar with such dramatic flair that you would think he was performing Shakespeare, and I would think to myself, I am the luckiest woman alive. The years rolled on the way they do when you are happy, fast, and slow at the same time. Thomas grew from a baby into a toddler into a little boy who loved dinosaurs and football and building things out of Lego. David got promoted at work, then promoted again. I moved from teaching to head of department. We renovated the kitchen, took family holidays to the coast, celebrated anniversaries with quiet dinners, and whispered promises. Every year on our anniversary, David would write me a letter. Not a card, a letter. Pages and pages of his thoughts, his gratitude, his love. I kept every single one of them in a box under our bed. I would read them sometimes when he was at work and I was having a bad day, and they would fill me with this warmth that made everything okay. We were not a couple who had lost their spark. Even after 15 years, David would bring me flowers on random Tuesdays. He would leave little notes in my lunch bag. He would come up behind me while I was cooking and wrap his arms around my waist and press his face into my neck and just breathe. I never, not once in 19 years, suspected that anything was wrong. I never found a strange text message on his phone. I never noticed lipstick on his collar or smelled unfamiliar perfume. He never came home at odd hours or made suspicious phone calls. There were no signs. Or maybe there were, and I was too blinded by my love for him to see them. I still do not know which possibility is worse. It started with what I thought was a yeast infection. I am a 44-year-old woman who has had yeast infections before, so I did not think much of it at first. I went to the chemist, bought the usual treatment, and waited for it to clear up. When it did not, I made an appointment with my GP, Dr. Patterson, a kind woman in her 50s who had been my doctor for over a decade. She examined me, took some swabs, and told me she would send them off and call me with the results. I remember sitting in that waiting room 3 days later when my phone rang. Dr. Patterson's voice was careful, measured, the way doctors sound when they are about to deliver news that will change your life. "Claire, I need you to come in. We have your results, and I would like to discuss them with you in person." I drove to the surgery with my stomach in knots, already running through every possible scenario in my head. I thought maybe it was something hormonal, something age-related, maybe early menopause causing some complication. When I sat down in her office and she told me that I had tested positive for gonorrhea, the room actually tilted. I am not being dramatic. The floor seemed to shift beneath my feet, and the walls seemed to close in, and I gripped the arms of the chair so hard that my knuckles turned white. "That cannot be right," I said. My voice sounded strange to me, thin and far away, like I was hearing myself speak from the end of a long tunnel. "There must be a mistake. Can you run the test again?" Dr. Patterson looked at me with an expression that was equal parts professional sympathy and genuine human compassion. "Of course, Claire. We can absolutely run it again." The second test came back positive too. Gonorrhea. Confirmed. I sat in Dr. Patterson's office for the second time in a week and stared at the wall behind her head, at a framed print of some peaceful countryside landscape, and I felt something inside me break. Not crack, not bend, break, like a bone snapping clean in two. "Claire," Dr. Patterson said gently, "gonorrhea is a sexually transmitted infection. It is transmitted through sexual contact. Given that your last sexual partner is your husband." She did not finish the sentence. She did not have to. The implication hung in the air between us like smoke, thick and suffocating and impossible to ignore. My husband had given me gonorrhea. My husband, the man who wrote me love letters every anniversary, the man who cried when our son was born, the man who held me every night and told me I was the only person he wanted to wake up next to for the rest of his life. That man had been sleeping with someone else, and he had not even had the basic decency, the basic respect for me and my body and my health, to use protection while doing it. I sat in that office and I cried. Not the pretty, cinematic kind of crying where a single tear rolls down your cheek. I am talking about the ugly, full-body sobbing that comes from a place so deep inside you that you did not even know it existed until something reached in and ripped it open. Dr. Patterson handed me tissues and sat with me in silence, and when I finally collected myself enough to speak, I asked her one question. How long could he have had this without me knowing? She explained that gonorrhea can sometimes be asymptomatic, especially in men. He could have been carrying it for weeks or even months before passing it to me. The thought of that, of David carrying this infection around while he kissed me goodnight, while he made me tea in the morning, while he sat across from me at dinner and asked me about my day, made me physically nauseous. I barely made it to the toilet before I was sick. I drove home that day on autopilot. I do not remember the drive at all. One moment I was in Dr. Patterson's car park, and the next I was pulling into our driveway, and David's car was already there because it was his work-from-home day. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the front door of the house that we had built our life in, the house where we had brought Thomas home from the hospital, the house where we had hosted Christmas dinners and birthday parties and lazy Sunday mornings. I stared at that door, and I tried to reconcile the life I thought I had with the life I apparently actually had, and I could not do it. The two realities would not fit together no matter how I tried to arrange them in my head. When I finally went inside, David was in the kitchen making coffee. He looked up and smiled at me and said, "Hey, love, How was the doctor? Everything okay? And I looked at this man I had loved for more than half my life, and I lied. I told him it was just a routine checkup. Everything was fine. And then I went upstairs to our bedroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed and shook. I could not confront him yet. I knew that much. If I confronted him now, in the state I was in, I would scream and cry, and he would apologize and make promises, and I would be too emotionally wrecked to think clearly. I had seen it happen to other people, to friends and family members who had discovered infidelity and confronted their partners in the heat of the moment, only to end up staying because they were too broken to leave. I was not going to be one of those people. I was going to be strategic. I was going to be smart. I was going to protect myself and my son, and then I was going to burn this whole thing down. The next few weeks were the hardest of my entire life. I had to pretend that everything was normal. I had to sit across from David at dinner and smile. I had to lie next to him in bed at night and listen to him breathe and not scream. I had to accept his kisses and his hugs and his casual affection while knowing that the same hands that touched me had been touching someone else. There were moments when the rage was so overwhelming that I had to leave the room, had to go stand in the garden in the cold just to feel something other than the white-hot fury that was burning a hole through my chest. I started taking my antibiotic treatment in secret, hiding the pills in my makeup bag where David would never look. Every time I took one, I felt a fresh wave of humiliation wash over me. Here I was, a 44-year-old woman treating herself for a sexually transmitted infection that her husband had given her, hiding the evidence like I was the one who had done something wrong. The injustice of it made me want to throw things, but I held it together. I held it together because I had a plan, and the plan required patience. The first thing I did was contact a solicitor. I found one through a recommendation from a colleague at work, a woman named Helen who specializes in family law. I sat in her office and told her everything, and she listened without judgment and then laid out my options clearly and calmly. She told me that in England, divorce is no fault, which meant I did not need to prove David's infidelity to get a divorce. I just needed to state that the marriage had irretrievably broken down. Part of me was relieved by this because it meant I would not have to drag the humiliating details of my diagnosis through a courtroom. But another part of me was furious because David deserved to have his betrayal documented and recorded and held up for the world to see. Helen also advised me to start getting my financial affairs in order. She asked me about joint accounts, savings, the house, pensions, all the practical, unsentimental details of untangling two lives that had been woven together for nearly 2 decades. I spent evenings after David went to sleep copying bank statements, photographing financial documents, creating a paper trail of our shared assets. I felt like a spy in my own home, gathering intelligence for a mission I never wanted to be on. During this time, I also had to deal with something that I had been dreading, Thomas. Our son had turned 18 in January and was in the process of enlisting in the armed forces. He was excited about it, full of purpose and determination, and the last thing I wanted to do was shatter his world right before he embarked on this new chapter of his life. But I also knew that I could not keep the truth from him forever. He was an adult now, and he deserved to know why his parents' marriage was ending. I told Thomas on a Saturday morning, just the two of us at the kitchen table while David was out running errands. I did not tell him about the gonorrhea. I could not bring myself to do that. I simply told him that his father had been unfaithful and that I was filing for divorce. Thomas sat very still for a long time, his jaw working as he processed what I was saying, and then he said something that broke my heart all over again. "I'm not surprised, Mom. I always thought he was too good to be true." Those words haunted me for days. My 18-year-old son had somehow seen something that I, in all my years of marriage, had missed entirely. Or maybe he had not seen anything specific. Maybe he had just picked up on some frequency of dishonesty that I had been too close to detect. Either way, the fact that my son was not surprised by his father's infidelity told me something about the foundation of my marriage that I did not want to examine too closely. Thomas was angry, not at me, thank God, but at his father. He became quiet and withdrawn around David, speaking to him in monosyllables, finding excuses to leave the room whenever David entered it. David noticed, of course, and asked me if I knew what was wrong with Thomas. I told him it was probably just stress about the enlistment. Another lie to add to the pile. I was becoming an expert liar, which is ironic because it was David's lies that had started all of this. I spent those weeks in a strange state of emotional suspension. On the surface, I was functioning. I went to work, I taught my classes, I marked papers, I attended staff meetings. But inside, I was hollow. I moved through my days like a ghost, present but not really there, going through the motions of a life that no longer felt like mine. The nights were the worst. Lying next to David in the dark, feeling the warmth of his body beside me, knowing that this closeness was built on deception. Sometimes I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying our entire marriage in my head, trying to pinpoint the moment when things went wrong. Was it after Thomas was born? Was it during those years when we were both so busy with work? Was it more recent? I drove myself half mad with questions that I knew I might never get answers to. I had been planning our 20th anniversary. That is the part that kills me the most, if I am being honest. I had started planning it months earlier, long before the diagnosis. I had booked a restaurant, David's favorite, the Italian place in the city center where we had our first anniversary dinner. I had arranged for Thomas to stay with my sister for the weekend so David and I could have the house to ourselves. I had even started looking at holiday packages for a trip to Paris, because David had always wanted to go to Paris and we had never quite gotten around to it. I had been pouring love and effort and money into celebrating a marriage that was already dead, and I did not even know it. When I canceled the restaurant reservation, the woman on the phone asked me if I wanted to reschedule. No, I said. No, I do not think I will be rescheduling. And then I hung up and sat on the floor of my classroom after the students had gone and cried into my hands, because the sheer waste of it all was too much to bear. 19 years. 19 years of my life, of my youth, of my love, given to a man who had repaid me with disease and deception. I finally moved out 2 weeks before I filed. I had found a small flat not far from our house, close enough that Thomas could easily visit, but far enough that I would not have to drive past the home I had shared with David every day. I moved my things on a Tuesday while David was at the office. My sister Rachel helped me, and she kept asking me why, what had happened, what had David done. I told her we were separating, that things had not been working for a while, that it was mutual. More lies. I was not ready to tell anyone the truth yet. The shame of it, not just the infidelity but the diagnosis, felt like a brand on my skin, something visible and permanent and deeply personal. When I finally confronted David, it was anticlimactic in the worst possible way. I had imagined this moment dozens of times in my head. In some versions, he broke down and begged for forgiveness. In others, he tried to deny it, tried to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. In a few dark versions, he was cruel, dismissive, telling me I had driven him to it somehow. But in reality, none of those things happened. I sat him down in the living room of what was now just his house, and I said, simply, "I know you have been unfaithful, David." And he went quiet, not silent, but quiet, in a way that I had never seen from him before. The color drained from his face. His hands, which had been resting on his thighs, went still. He did not deny it. He did not argue. He did not ask me what I was talking about or how I had found out. He just sat there, staring at the floor, and the silence between us was the loudest thing I had ever heard. After what felt like an eternity, he said, "I am so sorry, Claire." That was it. 3 words. 19 years of marriage, and all he had to offer me was 3 words. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to throw things, to break things, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain that I had been carrying for weeks. But I did not. I stood up, collected my things, and walked out the door. I did not look back. If I had looked back, I might have stayed, and I knew in my bones that staying would destroy me. He tried to call me afterwards, multiple times. He sent texts asking if he could explain. Explain what exactly? Explain how he ended up in bed with someone else? Explain how he decided that our vows, our life, our family were worth risking for whatever thrill he was chasing? I did not want his explanations. Explanations are for people who made mistakes, and what David did was not a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. What David did was a deliberate, sustained act of betrayal that he chose to commit over and over again, knowing full well what it would cost us if I ever found out. I texted him back once. Just once. I said, "There is nothing you could say that would make this okay. Please do not contact me again unless it is through our solicitors." He did not respond. Maybe he finally understood that some things are beyond words. My solicitor filed the divorce application on a Tuesday. I remember the exact moment because I was sitting at my desk at school when Helen called to confirm it had been submitted. I thanked her, hung up, and then stared at my phone for a long time. 20 years ago, almost to the day, David had proposed to me in that park by the lake. Now I was dissolving our marriage with a form and a filing fee. The symmetry of it was almost poetic in its cruelty. Thomas has been incredible through all of this. He is angry at his father, deeply angry, and I worry about that anger sometimes. He is about to embark on a career in the armed forces, and I do not want him carrying this rage with him into that world. But he has been a rock for me, checking in every day, bringing me food when I forget to eat, sitting with me in silence when I do not have the energy to talk. He is a good man, my son. He is a better man at 18 than his father was at 44, and I take some comfort in knowing that I had a hand in raising him. I have not told anyone about the gonorrhea. Not Thomas, not Rachel, not my friends, not my colleagues. Only Dr. Patterson and Helen know. There is a part of me that wonders if I will ever tell anyone, or if I will carry this secret with me forever, a private humiliation that I fold up and tuck away in the same box where I used to keep David's love letters. The irony is not lost on me. Some days I am angry. Some days I am sad. Some days I feel absolutely nothing at all, which is somehow the worst option of the three. I go through periods where I replay everything, examining every memory under a microscope, searching for the cracks that I missed. And then there are periods where I deliberately stop thinking about it, because if I think about it too hard, I will drown. People have told me that I should have seen it coming, that gonorrhea does not just appear out of nowhere, that there must have been signs, that I must have been ignoring red flags. To those people, I say this: you have no idea what you are talking about. When you trust someone completely, when you have spent nearly 2 decades building a life with someone, you do not look for signs. You do not check their phone or question their late nights or analyze their behavior for inconsistencies. You trust them. That is what marriage is supposed to be. And if trusting my husband makes me naive, then fine. I was naive, but I refused to feel ashamed of giving my love freely to someone who did not deserve it. The shame belongs to him, not to me. I went from planning our 20th anniversary to filing for divorce. I went from booking restaurants and browsing holiday packages to consulting solicitors and dividing assets. I went from being half of a partnership to being suddenly, devastatingly alone. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, is that I never saw it coming. There was no dramatic discovery, no caught-in-the-act moment, no suspicious text message left open on a phone. There was just a doctor's appointment and a test result and the quiet, clinical revelation that the life I thought I had was a lie. I am in my flat now, the small one near our old house. It is quiet here, too quiet sometimes. I have started decorating it, slowly, putting up photos and buying cushions and trying to make it feel like home. It does not feel like home yet. It feels like a place I am staying until I figure out what my life looks like now. But I am told that this is normal, that it takes time, that healing is not a straight line but a tangled, messy path that doubles back on itself and takes unexpected turns. I am trying to believe that. What I know for certain is this: I am 44 years old. I am a mother. I am a teacher. I am a woman who loved deeply and was betrayed completely. And I am still standing. I do not know what comes next. I do not know if I will ever trust someone the way I trusted David. I do not know if I will ever read another love letter without wondering what lies are hidden between the lines. But I know that I am still here, and I know that I deserve better than what I got. And I know that the hardest part of this is already behind me. The hardest part was not the diagnosis. It was not the weeks of pretending. It was not the confrontation or the move or the filing. The hardest part was accepting that the person I loved most in this world was not who I thought he was. That is a grief that goes beyond infidelity. It is the death of a person who never actually existed, and I am mourning someone who was never real. But I am here. I am breathing. I am putting one foot in front of the other. And every day, the distance between me and that doctor's office grows a little wider, and the weight on my chest gets a little lighter, and the future looks a little less terrifying. I do not know what comes next, but for the first time in months, I am okay with not knowing. Because whatever comes next, it will be mine. My choices, my life, my truth. And that is worth more than 19 years of someone else's lies. If you are going through something similar, if you have been betrayed by someone you trusted, If your world has been turned upside down by a revelation you never expected, I want you to know that you are not alone. The pain you are feeling is real and valid, and it will not last forever. Take your time. Get your affairs in order. Surround yourself with people who love you. And when you are ready, walk away from the person who broke your trust, because you deserve a life that is built on truth. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, subscribe for more stories like this one. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And remember, no matter how dark things get, you are stronger than you think. Subscribe for more stories.